much for joining us today. We've got a webinar today from the Quality Network for Psychiatric Intensive Care Units. My name is Kate Townsend and I'm the Deputy Programme Manager for the project. So today we've got a webinar on how technology can change services, and we've got learnings from Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership Trust. So presenting this webinar is Dr. Faith Ndebele, who's a consultant psychiatrist and medical lead at Coventry and Warwickshire Trust. She's also a member of the QNPICU accreditation committee and has been involved with the project for over 2 years, about 2.5 years. So yeah, I think it's a really good time to have this webinar. We've got, as services are becoming a little bit more settled from COVID, I think it's a really good opportunity to reflect on the lessons learned and what we would like to take away from it, the things that we'd like to keep. And obviously the thing that springs to mind the most is the advancements of technology. I know from a personal perspective, our IT teams have worked tirelessly to sort of do an upgrade that was planned to be across 2.5 years that had to be done over a matter of weeks to enable us all to be able to work from home and become a virtual college. So the importance of technology has really never been greater. And with that in mind, I'm really excited to hear about the sort of two different worlds of technology and mental health coming together to enable each other. So just before we begin, just a few things to mention. If everyone could please keep their microphones muted whilst Faith is talking. We will have an opportunity towards the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So I promote that people will use the raise the hand function to ask the questions, and I'll be facilitating that. We've got a couple of people from Oxy Health on the webinar who can help with any technical questions if there are any. Also, if we've had any issues with Wi-Fi, if people could turn their cameras off if it's not quite working, but we'll just see how it goes and hope for the best. But yeah, other than that, over to you, Faith. Thank you very much for doing the webinar today.
You're very welcome, Kate, and thank you everyone for attending. I'm absolutely delighted to be here today to share some of our findings from the Oxy Health project, who will, I'm sure, be very happy to answer any really technical questions that I might not be able to speak to at the end of the webinar. So if you've got any such questions, please make a note of them and ask them at the end. So I'm going to speak for about 40 to 45 minutes and then have an opportunity to take questions. Okay. So it's been quite the year for all of us, I think. As Kate has just alluded to, with the COVID-19 pandemic, and we've seen unprecedented changes that only happen once in a generation or a lifetime, if at all. But through all of this, we've had to really hard to maintain our common humanity, and we have been reminded of the power of kindness and community, and the importance of maintaining connections with each other, even while we keep a physical distance, has really been highlighted. We've harnessed on scale, and we have found new ways to live and to do our work. So there are no slides up yet, but I know there's a lot that seems to be going on my screen. So I'm not sure if anyone else needs to turn anything off so that things come up. But the technology I'm going to talk about today, it was there prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we started our project in our acute service at the beginning of 2019 in partnership with Oxy Health. Even though I'm not going to talk specifically about that today, we believe it will have a role to play in our services and millions into the way we deliver care in the future, post pandemic. And over the last we found that the use of non-contact technology to obtain a positive impact on patients as well as staff in terms of their well-being, and is helping us to start new conversations with patients and to encourage their agency and autonomy while enhancing safety in our everyday practice. So psychiatry is a very social specialism, and we don't often use gadgets or technology to deliver care. So incorporating the OxyHealth optical sensors in our everyday practice was something that, especially in the beginning, we really had to work on, but it has become easier as we see the positive results, that are evident in practice. So, Kate, you might need to help me here because I don't see my slides on screen. So I'm not really clear whether I'm able to continue to share them.
Okay, no problem, I'll share them.
Yeah, can you see that? I've got the first slide up on research and non-contact monitoring. So
that's not showing for anyone else, I don't think. Can everyone see that slide?
There's no slides visible, and also the reception's quite poor. I don't know if anyone else has. I've turned my camera off.
Yeah, reception is really poor from Faith's perspective. Kate, I can hear no problem, but Faith's reception seems to be coming in and out.
Oh dear. Sorry about this, everyone. We'll just try and work with Faith a little bit.
It's easier, Kate. I'm happy for you to share if you can't see my slides.
Faith, might I make a suggestion that you switch your camera off? That might help for us to hear your audio. Also, for anybody that still has their camera off, if we switch that off, it might help with Faith's bandwidth. And Kate, if I could present, please, because it looks like the slides are cut out on this image. So okay. I'll take the version that you sent.
Just give me a second and I'll make you a presenter.
Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see that.
Faith, over to you.
Yes, yeah, I'm able to see that. Okay, sorry about the technical glitch. All right, so to start then, so I'm going to spend the next 40 minutes talking about our experience of using the technology in our services and, describing some of our findings. So this is a research project that aims to assess whether a new contact monitoring technology improves quality of care and safety for staff and patients. And it's approved by the Research Ethics Committee and the Health Research Authority. And patients have to give consent at the time of admission or as soon as possible after that. And there's some
we don't have any sound.
I'm not sure what to do, but my microphone is on.
Yeah, I can hear you, Faith.
I can hear.
Yeah, I can hear.
So can I.
Yep, I can hear.
Okay, so that might just be maybe an isolated issue. I don't know. Are you okay for me to carry on?
Yeah, I think so. Go ahead.
All right. Okay, so I was just saying that it's patients have to give consent, but if there are patients that lack capacity and are unable to give consent, we have a process within the research protocol where consent can be given on their behalf by a consultee if we feel that there is sufficient clinical reason for us to do so. So this is a non-contact technology in the form of what is described as a digital care assistant. And it's installed in quite secure housing in the bedroom areas. And on our PICU, it's installed in our seclusion room. So this, as already mentioned, is a collaborative development with our partners from OxyHealth, who have been fantastic in their support of the project and have helped it to run as smoothly as it has. So it's been live since January 2019, but the results I'm going to speak to today just cover the period of January to December 2019. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where the area of the study is. And so that's obviously a picture of the front of our building at the Caledon Centre in Coventry, where the 3 patient areas where the technology is installed are placed. So the technology is placed in our PICU, which is an 11-bed area for males, and also has a seclusion room, and the technology is installed in that as well. And then we have it in our one of our female wards, and a male acute treatment ward. It's, as I'm sure are many of the units across the country, a very busy unit with an average occupancy of about 94%, with acutely unwell patients being admitted, especially over the last year or two. The acuity of patient clinical presentation seems to have increased. So between 75 to 130 patients are discharged from each of the wards per year. But like I'm sure all of you, we have had ongoing issues with staffing. So there have been some challenges around substantive staff, which is common across all of the wards involved in the study and the control wards, but maybe not so much on the PICU, where there's been more stability. And so the types of incidents that we were looking at that inform our data include self-harm and assault. And we knew from looking at the data from the previous year, the baseline year, that more than 50% of self-harm and assault incidents occur in bedroom areas in our female wards, and about 20 to 30% on our male wards. And that in our female wards, self-harm is the dominant incident type, whereas, as you might expect, assaults are the dominant type in the male bedrooms. Okay, so what do some of our bedrooms look like? This one seems a little bit bare. That's because that's one of the rooms in our PICU. And the reason we've got that, we've put that there, is to show you what the technology actually looks like. So if you look on the left of the screen, of the slide, there is a little, like oblong rectangular type box in the corner. So that houses the optical sensor or camera, really, because that's what it is, and the infrared illumination system in that housing. And we then have a monitoring screen that's placed in the nurse's station. And this is done in such a way that it protects patient privacy. So nobody looking into the office can actually see what is on the screen. But I'm going to show you what the screen looks like on the next slide. So in short, the technology is able to give us pulse and breathing rate measurements without disturbing the patient. So in a non-contact way, without the patient being aware that it's even going on, it doesn't disturb them. The system is able to generate alerts and warnings to any high-risk activity that might be going on in the patient's bed area. For example, if a patient has spent too long in the bathroom, you can determine this as a team, then an alert goes off, so that prompting the team to go to the patient's bedroom to check to see that they're okay. If, for example, there are multiple people that have entered the room, you will get an alert. Or at nighttime, and the hours between 12 and 6 o'clock, if a patient leaves a room, then an alert goes off. So the members of staff on the ward are aware that a patient has left their bedroom area and can just check to see that the patient is okay, and that check if they need anything. We also are able to get reports on patient behavior. And so you can get like summary charts of patient activity that will show you how much time a patient has spent in bed, how much time they spent in their room, the frequency of bathroom visits, like in terms of going in and out of the bathroom. Really helpful. This is what you see if you are in the nurse's station. So this is what you might see on the screen. So this is an example of a 10-bed ward where you might just at a glance see that there are, for example, 3 patients that are on their bed and a couple of patients that are in their room. So very helpful to give us data at a glance, statistic for the nursing teams on the ward. This is, remember I talked about the system being able to generate activity reports. This is what you can see if you come onto the ward and you want to see what has been happening with one of your patients. You click on the room number, then click on the tab that says, activity reports, and you get a summary like this that just shows you over the course of a few days what's been happening for the patient. For example, giving you at a glance, you can see how much time someone has spent in bed. On the right, there's like summary information of like the total time that the patient has done certain things, room entry, etc. This in conjunction with other clinical data that you might be aware of about the patient can help you to make clinical decisions or have an idea what's going on with the patient. It can be quite time saving actually, if you come in and you click through all of the different rooms and get an idea for each of the patients. What I'm going to do now is just talk a little bit about the actual study before I share with you some of the findings that we're really excited about. So just in brief, this is a before and after study, and it's a partial cohort study because whilst we had control wards for the acute treatment wards, we didn't have a similar control ward for the PICU area because we just have the one PICU on site. The period referred to in the results will be the baseline period in 2018 from January to December, and then the active period, as I mentioned earlier in the introduction, is from January to December 2019. So this excludes data from this year. We wanted to compare like for like, so 2018 to 2019. So the data that was collected included the incident data provided by our Trust Incident Data Collection System. And we also conducted some staff surveys and interviews of patients last year, and I'll share the results of that a bit later on. We also considered, what might be confounders and looked at, whether there were changes in policy or operational issues that might impact on the results. And we're satisfied that there was nothing in there that would impact the results of the study. And so now to the really exciting bit of this project for myself and my fellow clinicians. It has been so heartening to see the positive impact on safety and quality that has occurred since introducing the technology into services. Before we had a chance to evaluate the results, we had obviously the subjective view that the technology was changing the way we practice and was having an impact on the quality of care that we provide. But we obviously didn't have the hard data to support that. And so when the data was analyzed and we saw it, it was really exciting to see. So these are the results from the PICU. The highlights are that there was a 26% reduction in bedroom assaults and a 40% reduction in rapid tranquilization incidents related to assault, which is really fantastic when you think about it. And then we also had, data from, interviews, etc., to see, to show that there has also been an improvement in physical health monitoring of our patients. I'm going to speak to some of these results a little bit more, so you can, see what they look like. So the reduction in assaults on the PICU, you can see there that in 2019 compared to 2018, there was this reduction of 26%, which we think is because staff were better able to monitor patients in their bedroom areas in a less intrusive way. So whereas in the past you might maybe have hovered around the door or nearby in the corridor to just ensure that somebody was sufficiently calm, for example, if you could see that they were escalating. You can now do this by, doing spot checks on the system to get an idea of what's going on in a patient's room. And the staff have the additional advantage of just being able to locate where their patients are on the ward. There's also the added advantage of like the alerts that show when other people go into the room. So for instance, if another patient goes into a room, you get an alert, and that in itself can contribute to helping reduce the assaults in the bedroom areas. And so I'm going to just share with you an example from one of our colleagues on the PICU to just show you in the usual way of working what this looks like in practice. So she shares this example of a patient that had been transferred from another ward due to being particularly aggressive and chaotic, and who had caused damage to ward property. He had previously broken a window, in the acute treatment ward, and had used that to harm himself and to threaten members of staff. And he was thereafter admitted to the PICU. And when the staff on the PICU heard a loud smash coming from his bedroom, they immediately checked the OxyHealth system in the office, did a spot check just to get an idea what was going on in the room, see whether the window had been broken and if it was safe to enter, and plan for what to do. They were able to immediately see that the window was not broken, and were able to make the clinical judgment to enter the room and try and de-escalate the situation. And our team member here describes that it's times like these where the system has potentially been a life-saving tool for the staff and patients. So I think it's really, for me, it's brilliant to see this particular set of results. The 40% reduction in rapid tranquilization is a significant reduction, and as a clinician, really pleasing to see, because rapid tranquilization is one of those things that you really don't want to use unless it's necessary. And so to see this massive reduction in the number of rapid tranquilization incidents has been one of the great things, I think, about this project for me in particular. And we think that, similar to when I talked about, the reduction in assaults, this is obviously linked to the fact that staff can do things in a less intrusive way, and this is very helpful in terms of how patients react, in terms of increased, there being less of an increase in agitation, for example, and people being able to calm down, on their own without having people immediately surrounding them. But with the staff having that peace of mind of being able to check on the system to ensure that the patient is doing okay, and to get an idea whether the situation is de-escalating. So this is one of those results, as I said, that we're just ecstatic about, to be honest. And then, as again, like the last time, just to show you what this might potentially look like in practice, this is a real example of one of our deputies that described a case where a patient had been violent and aggressive and was a danger to self and others, and it was difficult to calm him down. And so rapid tranquilization had to be given. And as all of us do in these situations, we take we take observations frequently in the first hour to ensure that there are no issues, for example, with respiratory depression, etc. This patient refused to have his physical observations taken and remained quite chaotic. And so the staff was able to use the system when the patient was still enough for it to be possible to measure his breathing rate and his pulse rate in a non-contact way, so remotely. And in addition to that, to continue to monitor his behavior to ensure that he wasn't a threat to himself whilst avoiding further agitation. So, as mentioned there, having the system has been fantastic for this purpose, because we can make sure we are caring for the patient's physical health whilst keeping the risk of harm low. So the following is another example of how physical health monitoring can be improved. There are many different ways that you can use the system to ensure that you're keeping an eye on patients for whom you have a concern regarding their physical health. So this is an example of a patient with COPD who refused to have his physical observations done every day. There were some concerns about his weight. He was quite a shallow breather when he was asleep. And the staff often found it difficult to tell whether he was really breathing or not when they were doing their checks. And so it was really reassuring for them to be able to take spot checks to just see what his vital observations were like in terms of his breathing and his heart rate. And as mentioned there by the team member, it was really useful because if his respiratory rate or his heart rate changed and there were concerns, the medical team could be alerted, and this was reassuring for the team in general. Okay, so I've just taken you through our findings from the PICU area. We just highlighted the particular findings that were particularly significant for us. So the 26% reduction in assaults, the 40% reduction in rapid tranquilization, and the couple of examples demonstrating how physical health monitoring can be improved by using the system. So I'm now going to move on to talk a little bit about some of the findings from our acute treatment wards, from the 2 treatment wards that are part of the research project. And on these wards, I think we particularly focused on the self-harm incidents because the numbers of assaults were not as many as on the PICU. So the data I'm going to show reflects that. And we were again really pleased to see the overall 22% reduction in bedroom self-harm. And when this was broken down, we could see that in our female wards, there was a massive 66% reduction in bathroom ligatures and a 15% reduction in the bedroom area. So overall as well, in addition to the self-harm data, there was a reduction in bedroom assaults. And so to look at this, some of this data in a little bit more detail. So in acute bedrooms, the reduction of there was a reduction of the 22% during the active period compared to the baseline period in 2018, as you can see there with the bar chart on your left. And if you look specifically at the self-harm incidents in the bathroom areas, there was an overall reduction of 60%, which is stunning, to be honest. So it's showing you that the incidents that happen in bathrooms, because of the way the technology and the alerts are configured, it really alerts the staff to be able to intervene probably a lot sooner than they might have done in the past. So looking then at the data well, it's the same data really in the female acute wards, which I've just spoken to regarding the ligatures. So we'll move on to talk a little bit more then about how this data compared to the control wards. So when we looked at our OxyHealth wards that have the technology, we were able to see that there was a 22% reduction in self-harm. And when you compared that to the control wards, there was actually an increase in the control wards of 39%, meaning that when OxyHealth wards were compared to control wards, there was a statistically significant reduction in self-harm, which is really quite, exciting to see. I see we have a hand up from a David Richardson, and I don't know whether you wanted to ask your question now or you are happy to wait until the end.
I'm not sure. Are you able to tell me once you've heard it?
To the end. The question was whether the reduction in self-harm incidents in bedrooms or bathrooms, whether the behaviour simply moved to other areas of the ward or whether there was an overall reduction.
There was an overall reduction in ward self-harm incidents. So it wasn't that we noticed this reduction in bed areas and then there were overall changes in the rest of the ward. I don't think we've got that data to reflect that, but this is in overall there was a reduction for the wards.
Okay, thank you.
So this is just a case example for what for how this works on the wards for the teams, just illustrating how we get these reductions in ligatures and other self-harm. So this is a case vignette where the team were concerned about a patient that was known to be at high risk of ligating. And they'd just done their observations, but felt uneasy about her safety. So whereas in the past they would have, probably had to go and just immediately check to see because they were feeling uneasy, they were able to just do a spot check on the monitors in the nurses' station to see what was happening in the room. And so by doing this, rather than walking to the patient's room to see what the patient was doing, giving the patient an opportunity to perhaps hide a ligature, etc., they were able to see on the screen that the patient was trying to tie an item. And so we're able to go to her room, and because they knew the item was already there, they were able to find the item and remove it before she could come to any harm. And so, the team member here says we've caught a few potential ligatures early in this way. So I guess the message there is that whereas in the past you might not be able to really prove that someone has something on them, when you're able to see it on screen, it's then easier for you to, to be able to find it and take it away. And so I'm going to pause a little bit there because we've talked a lot about the experience of the teams and how they've responded to patients and how they've used the technology to carry out their normal usual way of working. And we thought that it might be interesting for you to see what patients think about this technology. And so last year, we carried out a survey of some of the patients that were on our wards to see what their thoughts were on this technology. And so all of the patients that took part in the survey said that they felt reassured of their safety by having the technology in place. And all of them felt that their well-being would improve as a result. And they felt that the technology supports the nurses to care for their physical health. And surprisingly, given that they have a camera in their room, even though it's important to say at this point, it's not closed-circuit television, it's not continuous video monitoring. So there's no one sitting in a room somewhere looking at what everyone is doing. You literally just see the screen as I showed you earlier, and you can only see what's happening in the bedroom if you do a spot check, and you have to have a reason for doing that. But the patients, knowing all of this and knowing that there was a camera, felt that actually they had a better sense of privacy with the technology in place, which was really, really good to hear. Because people have various ideas about monitoring, as I'm sure you know. And this is a quote from one of the patients that we interviewed who said that, I know that I'm being watched, and I would have said for my own benefit and my health, whenever I'm in the room, it's peace of mind knowing that if anything happens to me, the staff are alerted and they can come in and do what's necessary. So a really positive quote, I guess. And the next one just says that they think this is the way forward, because this particular patient recognized that staff can't be there all of the time outside everyone's room, and but was pleased that if anybody gets into trouble, they can, the staff are there straight away.
Yep.
So.
Okay, no problems. Cool. Thank you, Buck.
Okay. These are that's what the patients thought of the technology when we interviewed them and did the survey last year. So I'm just going to spend the last few minutes before we have the questions and discussion, just giving you my thoughts about the relationship of clinicians and patients with technology, and how we can embrace and encourage the use of technology in our service to enhance patient care. So starting off with patients, how do you get patients on board with this idea for them to be able to see this as something that is really positive and helpful in terms of their patient recovery on our wards? So one of the things we found really helps is to be really clear about what the technology consists of, because this can allay fears and concerns. State that it is a camera. Yes, it's an optical sensor that uses infrared, illumination technology, but it's in fact a camera. It's not continuous video monitoring, and there's no one sitting there all the time just watching all that you do. It's there to support and enhance the care that is provided, but it's not there to replace, human beings. It's not there to replace staff. So the staff are still there, but because they have the additional advantage of having the technology, they're able to do their work in such a way that it makes it more safe for the patients. The technology is able to measure movement, as described previously, and take vital observations in terms of a pulse and a breathing rate. It's there, in essence, to reduce disturbance and to help the patients to get a better quality of sleep, because there'll be less intrusion when staff are worried for their safety. So it helps to keep people safe. And we have found that it really makes a difference how you introduce the technology to the patients. So when someone is first admitted and they are being shown around the ward and being introduced to their room, if you make this part of that induction, and you normalize the technology as being part of care delivery, it really goes a long way, I think, to have people understand and agree to it. So everybody on the team really does need to have quite, like a good understanding of what the technology does, and to feel confident and to be comfortable in having conversations with patients regarding the optical sensors, and to be able to signpost to peers on the ward that might have more information and be able to answer more detailed questions. As part of the study, we have obviously written information that is given to patients. We have patient leaflets that describe in detail, in a simple way, what the study is about and what the technology does. And so this is also offered to the patients to have them read in their rooms and then to ask questions before they sign a consent form. And we've found actually that by having this conversation very early on in that admission process, somehow, I know this is anecdotal, but somehow it seems to change the conversation with the patient, and to center, the discussion or the conversation around staying safe and the patient having some responsibility for keeping themselves safe. So it enhances, I think, a patient's agency and, how they engage in further treatment, on the ward. So, to look at how, this might look like, on the ward, this is just an example, from one of the team about how having the technology on the ward sort of gives peace of mind that I've alluded to earlier, and how the team is able to continue to take positive risks, as has happened in the past, But the difference being that now they can do that whilst having the peace of mind of knowing that they can check on things by using the system. So by checking on the monitors to see how the patient is doing in their room. So it helps the patients as well to feel that they're making progress and are achieving something in terms of keeping themselves safe, and allows them to have a sense of ownership in terms of their recovery, because they don't have this maybe presence that might have been there before, with people hovering in corridors and nearby to try and make sure that a patient is safe. So it allows the patient really to take some responsibility and start on their journey of getting better. And then so finally, then before we stop, looking at how as clinicians we relate to technology. I think it's really, really, really important with anything that's new that you generate like enthusiasm and excitement about a novel technology, because you will need that energy and excitement to keep driving the project forward. So we know that in these situations, there are always people that advocate for, for something, and there will be some skeptics. So it's important to really harness and embrace that energy from the advocates. Enthuse them, the project, give them information, get them to learn as much as they can about the system, because they will be really helpful in supporting fellow colleagues who may not be as enthusiastic and who may be skeptical about the technology. And it really helps to create a safe place to raise fears and concerns early on, if you can get the different groups of people talking and having conversations about the technology. It's important as well. We've been really lucky in our trust to have a trust board and senior management that have really embraced technology in all its different versions. And for this project in particular, we've had strong support from them, which has allowed us to, in the individual teams, to have the freedom to operate with a safety net, because we know that operationally we have that support, and it has made it easy to make changes. Things haven't been made too strict in terms of how we do our ways of working. So whilst we've continued to work in the usual ways, whilst we're doing the research project, we've had that freedom to change things and explore how the technology works in an organic way. So I think it's really important when you are thinking about introducing something like this in your own areas, that you think about how this works for clinicians. I think one of the things that I would also say is that it's important, if at all possible, to ensure that staff using the technology see the value of it quite early on, because this will encourage them to continue to use it. So one of the ways that we do this in our setting is the 3 ward areas that have the technology. We meet once a month, like in an operational group, to share positive case examples from the different wards, share any challenges that we might be having, talk about what we're doing, how we are using the technology in different ways. And we have found that this protects from losing enthusiasm and momentum early on, whilst you embed the technology into practice. So I guess those are my thoughts on how you can do that with the technology. And so I know that we only have 15 minutes to go, so I will sort of leave you with these thoughts. As I've said throughout this presentation, I am really, really excited about the results of this project, and in particular the reductions that we have seen in rapid tranquilization incidents, and a reduction of incidents of aggression in patient bedrooms, and equally the significant reductions in self-harm in our acute wards. These are particularly encouraging. So I'm pleased about the potential for continued improved physical health monitoring, and look forward to having the technology as part of our usual way of working, so that we can take full advantage of the functionalities of the technology, and as a result, disturb our patients less at night, while still being mindful of their safety. In my view, technology has a place in psychiatry and can help us to improve the quality of care that we provide, and to consolidate that that very real human connection that is so important to all of us. And this can only contribute, in my opinion, to better outcomes and to improved experiences for our patients. So I will end there. And I guess all that's left really is for me to acknowledge the enormous number of people that have made this project a success, and to thank the Royal College of Psychiatry and Kate Townsend for enabling us to present our findings in this forum, and all of the people from Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership Trust that have in their different ways enabled this project to continue. And lastly but not least, the Oxy Health team, who have been fantastic partners in all of this, and without whom we wouldn't really have been able to continue with the project and to manage it as well as we've done. And so thank you again to all of you for attending and for listening. I'm happy to stop here now and hear your thoughts, comments, and questions.
Thank you so much, Faye. That's really, really amazing findings. I think we've got at least one person with their hand up, and we've got a few questions in the chat box.
Okay.
So, should we go to the hands up first?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out who that is. So we've got, is it Zuba Patel?
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead and ask the question?
Zuba Patel. I can't hear any questions.
No.
Hear. Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah.
Yes, yeah. Now we can hear you.
So we use a system called a nerve centre for recording physical health observations. In terms of pulse rates and respiration rates being recorded via Oxy Health, do you use anything? Do you use systems similar to Nerve Centre? Does Oxy Health talk to the electronic patient records?
The question. So, Kate, if you're able to summarize for me, because I couldn't quite hear the question.
Sorry, I think you cut out a little bit, Zuba. Can you just repeat that? Yeah,
so I suppose I've got a four-part question, but the first bit was around Oxy Health and its ability. Forget that question. In terms of patients, in terms of the patients and their views on monitoring the system, obviously some fantastic feedback. Have there been any damages or damage attempts on the monitoring systems within the rooms?
Yes, I can speak to that. So there was in our seclusion room, there was an incident where we had a patient that was really unwell, quite chaotic, aggressive, and violent, and he basically, and the only thing that survived in the room was the Oxy Health. So I think some of the housing might have been a little bit battered, but the system itself continued to work. You could still see into the room and you could still obtain the vital observations. And considering the state of the rest of the room, it was actually quite surprising to see how well it withstood that. There was, I think a few weeks ago, we noticed a patient, we don't really know how he managed to get up there, but I think he'd managed to try and cover the monitor so that you couldn't like maybe see into the room, but you could still get vital observations. So
Right,
you could still tell. Yeah.
Brilliant. And my last bit is, obviously we've seen the clinical benefits, and I have looked at OxyHealth previously in the last 12 months for some of our older adult wards. But from the PICU and acute ward, have there been any staffing or operational cost benefits by procuring OxyHealth?
That's something that we are actually in the process of just trying to quantify at the moment, because we've just finished analyzing this data. So the next bit is going to be to look at the data and everything that goes with that to see what the value is operationally. You know, have we managed to save you know, money by maybe having reduced enhanced observations? I think unlike in our older adult service, who had the same project going before we started, you know, when they did the data analysis, they were able to show very real savings. So we haven't yet been able to do that, but we're in the process of doing that.
Cool.
And happy to share the findings when we get them.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
That's it from me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I know that we've got Faith Ndebele, who's got her hand physically up, so I'll go to her next. You're on mute, by the way, Faith.
You're on mute.
Me.
Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, I think thank you so much. It was very, very interesting presentation. And I can see how enthusiastic and passionate you are about this technology. And it's great to hear. I work on an inpatient acute assessment unit. And my question was, first of all, I don't know, I think, what is it called? This technology, is it optical sensor you mentioned?
Yeah, so it's called it's called OxyHealth. It's an OxyHealth technology. So my OxyHealth partners can tell you exactly the name, but we call it the OxyHealth technology. It's made up of optical sensors, which use infrared illumination to be able to give the results that I was talking about. So it's called OxyHealth.
Yeah. Obviously, the findings you presented, they do definitely sound very promising. But I was wondering, the ward I work on, it's an acute assessment unit with 18 beds. And yet, the striking thing which I found interesting was to reduce the self-harming behaviors in their rooms, particularly when they are there on their own. But the thought I had was, when you do the nursing observations, do you see them on cameras? Would there be a nursing staff at the nursing station to watch all those cameras 24/7, or how does it work?
Okay, so the way it works, it's not that you have, it's not like CCTV that you've got cameras and you've got like each different room showing up on screen. It's not like that at all. So it's more about you are able to see into the room. If you specifically go into a bed area and click on that, you are then able to get like a 10-second visualization of what's happening at that time, whilst being able to take the spot observations of the breathing rate and the heart rate. So you literally have to click in order to be able to obtain your vital observations. And whilst you're doing that, you can see what the patient is doing in those few seconds. At the moment, because we're still in the research phase, we are still carrying on with our business as usual. So it's a bit of a strange sort of system. So we are continuing with the nursing staff having to go to a patient's room at night and look through the viewing panel to see whether a patient is okay or not. The only difference is that whereas in the past, if people were not sure that someone was breathing or not, and they think that someone is breathing, but they're not sure, they'd go in, shine a torch and see what was happening. What they're doing now, if they think that someone is okay, but they're not sure, they go to the monitor and, do a spot check to just make sure. So we have less of the intrusion that we had in the past. Obviously, once we come out of the research phase, it will be much simpler, and the staff will be able to just merely click on each bed area to check on observations and that the patient is okay.
Yeah. And the other question I had was that most of our patients who are admitted, they do present with some psychotic features and especially paranoia. And would it not actually add or pollute to their symptoms in a way that most of them sometimes do feel that there are cameras in their rooms, and how it is going to affect their mental state in that case?
You know what, we found out actually at the start of the study when we were talking about it, that patients for some reason think they're already being watched. Quite a significant number of patients think when they're in psychiatric units, we are already watching them. They have this idea from, I'm not sure where, this is just an anecdotal thing. We didn't ask like a whole number of patients, but this is what people think. They're like, oh, but aren't you watching us anyway? Because they think that maybe, you know, we have systems to keep them safe. But speaking to your point, with patients that have paranoid psychotic symptoms, what I've found is that it can go either way. So you have patients that are paranoid and are like, yes, have the camera on so that you can see what's happening in my room. I want the camera on so that, you know, it'll be clear to you as well. And then obviously you have the people that are like, no, I don't want it, you know, this is, and it becomes part of their sort of delusional system. But I don't think we've seen it making things worse, so to speak. So it's about having that conversation with the patients. I mean, at the moment, because we're still in the research phase, people are not forced to have the camera on unless if they lack capacity. We think for some reason, if they've got underlying health issues, we think it's really important to monitor them. Then we, you know, we'll go through the process of being able to turn it on until they have capacity. But yeah, it's been surprising that actually some of the paranoid patients don't mind having it on because they think that it will protect them in some way.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question before we're going to have to round up. If I can just ask if anyone who we don't get to, if you just want to write the question in the chat box, then we can send them to Faith and Oxy Health and get a summary written up. But if we just go for the last question to Oluwase Akanro. You might be on mute. I'm not sure if you know.
There's also another raised hand from Guy.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to Guy.
Hello there. I'm Guy Chevalier. I'm from East London and the Chef Foundation Trust. Thank you very much again for this very nice presentation. That's very informative. I was wondering if I'm not a clinical person, but I'm more of a technical person, a project manager. My question would be regarding the efficiency. Most people, when it comes to new medications, in order to prove the efficiency of medications, they're using a placebo effect. It seems that some of the awareness of having a camera and being present will actually get people to calm down, to be more probably responsible of their behavior. So if we were to use this placebo effect in the sense of using a fake camera in bedrooms, would it have actually a similar effect?
You know what, I have no idea. I mean, I guess you're looking at things like using, as you would in studies, using like placebos compared to like an active, you know, medication. I guess if you could get a study funded to do it that way, it might be interesting to see. I think for us, we don't think all of the effect is due to that. I think it's the additional ability to be able to, as clinicians, have an idea of what is going on with the person in terms of their mental state that then informs our decision making regarding the clinical state and potential management. So I think, yes, some of what you say might, you know, be true, but I think the system is more than just that. So I think to gain full advantage, you would need to have an actual working camera.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Well, I think we're going to have to round up there because it's 2:30. So I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's joined us on the webinar and were patient at the beginning through our technical issues. And I hope you enjoyed it. And as I said, we'll We'll write a summary of questions of everything that's in the chat box and send that round. This webinar was recorded, so we'll make that available as well following the webinar. But thank you very much, Faith, for presenting the findings. It was really, really interesting and very positive. And thank you to Oxy Health as well for supporting.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Yeah.
Lovely. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Bye now.
Bye.